Welcome to this lecture on Weimar cinema after Dr. Caligari. What was the situation in Germany before 1923, first of all? Well, we know the period 1919 to 23 is often called the years of crisis. The reason for this is not just because of the national humiliation felt by Germany as a result of the Treaty of Versailles and actually losing the war, but because the republic itself, this new fledgling republic, was threatened by the extreme left and the extreme right, both in 1919, 1920, and probably more famously in 1923 by a certain Mr. Hitler. Not only that, but it was invaded by the French and the Belgian troops in January 1923, and as a result of that suffered the famous hyperinflation. What's something that other people don't realise is that there were a number of epidemics, mainly of Spanish flu, which killed many thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people during this period. The period 1924 to 29, though, was known as the Golden Years, and this was a period of relative stability in Weimar Germany, mainly because the USA propped up the German economy through loans agreed as a result of the Dawes Plan. On the back of this came an increase in productivity and national wealth, although this didn't trickle down to everybody and was mainly confined to urban areas, mainly Berlin and the Ruhr Valley. What was happening socially in this time? Well, women at this time had worked in many heavy industries right across Europe as a result of the war, who were replacing men who had gone to fight. This occurred, as I say, in a number of European countries. With this and the fact that many countries extended suffrage to women, in other words, women got the vote, or many women got the vote after the war, especially in Germany, this gave women a better sense of their own independence. Also, in economic terms, employment meant in employment, white-collar workers were increasing, not rather than the blue-collar workers, the working-class workers, and this included women workers in secretarial jobs. Women now had money to make their own choices. Some women adopted more extreme standards and were known as flappers. And this term, flapper, in the 1920s referred to a new breed of young women who wore short skirts, bobbed their hair, listened to what was then considered unconventional music, i.e. jazz, and flaunted the disdain for what was then considered decent behaviour. They were seen as brash in their time for wearing excessive makeup, drinking hard liquor, treating sex as a more casual manner, smoking cigarettes, driving automobiles, and otherwise flouting conventions of social and sexual norms. Not only that, but they chewed gum as well. And here are some examples of what we call flappers. Some in those photographs are probably more extreme than others, but notice the amount of flesh on show. And if you want to sort of compare it, for example, to the more conventional clothes of Edwardian women and also women and the clothes women wore in the First World War, then you'll notice this was a major step forward. What were reactions at this time by men? Well, they feared these newfound freedoms being enjoyed by women, and to such an extent that art seems to suggest a hatred and disgust with the female half of the population. And in many ways, this is where we start to get the idea of the femme fatale. Leading up to World War II, much of the art was under the influence of expressionism in different parts of the world, which abandoned any sense of order or commitment to objectivity or tradition. Expressionism in particular was the dominant form of art in Germany and was represented in many different facets of public life, in dance, theatre, painting, architecture, poetry, literature, and in this case, in film. Expressionists abandoned nature and sought to express emotional experience, often centering their art around the inner turmoil or angst, very German word there, whether in reaction to the modern world or to the alienation from society that they felt, or, as often the case, the creation of personal identity. In concert with this evocation of angst and unease with bourgeois life, expressionists also echoed some of the feelings of revolution, and many of them would join the extreme left parties, such as the Communist Party, that had been set up in Germany and other European countries at this time. Having said that, though, other artistic elements were coming through, new styles and new influences, and one of these was the what became known as new objectivity. German films were still being influenced right through to about 1924, such as films like Nosferatu, De Golem, Destiny and Dr. Mabuse. However, as I say, by 25 this influence was waning because of this new objectivity movement, or Neusachlichkeit as it was called in Germany. This was running current in Weimar culture at the time, at the same time as Expressionists had been, especially from the mid-1920s onwards. It was a term used to characterise the attitude of public life in Weimar Germany, as well as art, literature, music and architecture. Rather than some goal of philosophical objectivity, it was meant to imply a turn toward practical engagement in the world, an all-business attitude understood by Germans as intrinsically American. The Neusachlichkeit is Americanism, the cult of the objective, the hard fact, the predilection for functional work, professional consciousness and usefulness. In other words, trying to capture life as it really was. Although some took it to more extreme levels and used it to criticise society with using satire. And key painters and artists this time would be George Grosz, Otto Dix and Max Beckmann, and there we can see examples of their art. Other painters, called the magic realists, want to look at society as it was but avoided the political criticism. Most of the painters and later the film directors that used the key ideas and themes of new objectivity could be seen as representing the alienation from actual lived reality and be seen as to make an implicit criticism of consumerism of the period through the sense of hyperrealism, which generated a sense of unreality. Cinema was also influenced by this new movement and can be seen in a number of different directors using the style in their films. As a cinematic style, it translates into realistic settings, straightforward camera work and editing, a tendency to examine inanimate objects as a way to interpret characters and events, a lack of overt emotionalism and social themes. Often, this idea of Americanism or the Hollywood influence was coming through as well. These new concerns became through in films in the mid-20s, most spectacularly with Metropolis, which brought together expressionistic set design and concerns of a society engrossed with materialism. One of the key directors that was using this new style was G.W. Pabst, who started off working in Austria and then moved to Berlin and worked in the German film industry. Pabst's works deal with a range of social problems such as prostitution, labour disputes, inflation and marital problems in such films as The Joyless Street, starring Asta Nielsen and Greta Garbo. Notice both of those were not new film actresses, but were big stars in Germany, but also the fact that they had come in from outside, both of them from Scandinavia. People did criticise Pabst, mainly for favouring the beauty of appearances through the creation of surface effects. He was both provocatively materialist and profoundly consumerist in orientation. In other words, he liked to show objects as a way of not just of criticising society, but also because of the beauty of them at the same time, and so created quite a ambiguous view of the world. Was he critiquing the world, but or at the same time loving the things that were created by that world? Pabst's later films were much more about the effect of war on society and has been defended as a use of irony in terms of celebration of consumerism. So people wearing clothes, buying things, he was using that, in other words, in an ironic sense, and so this was the way that people defended him. Hopefully when we watched Pandora's Box, you'll be able to see key elements of all of this in his films and also decide for yourself, is he critiquing it or celebrating it?